Let's look at some of the basic features of Excel: cell formatting, the fill handle, and copy and paste. I'll also throw in some extras along the way. So even if you've used Excel before, you should be able to pick up some things you didn't already know. Let's start with cell formatting. When you open a fresh worksheet, each cell is formatted in the general format. But you can change this between a number of commonly used formats such as number, currency, accounting, date, and percentage. Let's start with the general format. When working with text and simple numbers, general is all you need. So let's put in, say, 3 regions to keep it simple, and 3 numbers. Now each cell is in the general format, but Excel still knows that some of these cells are text and some are numbers. So we can, for example, just go up to Auto Sum, put in a formula in D6, and Excel correctly adds up those numbers. Now, these are actually amounts of money, so it would be better to have a couple of decimal places. So what we can do is change the number format from general to number, and that gives us a number with 2 decimal places. What I might also want to do is put in a $sign. We can do that with the currency format. It's the same as number, but it has a $sign at the beginning. Now accountants like to line up their $signs nice and neatly, so there's another format called the accounting format. So let me just widen that column width a little and change to accounting format. Accounting format is the same as currency, except the $signs are nice and neatly lined up. So let me just do a couple of Control Zs to go back to the number format. And we'll say that these are last year's figures, and we'll put in this year's figures. Nicely rounded numbers, and then I can fill across this formula so it'll add up this year as well. Now what we might want to do is put in a percentage increase column. So we want to know how much sales have increased this year as compared to last year. Now before we do, let me just talk about percentages. If we want to find 3/4 of an amount, say 200, we would type in 0.75 into a cell. And multiply them together. 0.75 by 200 is going to give us 150. Now I can change the format of this cell to a percentage. This displays as 75%, but the underlying value is still stored as 0.75. So when you first type in as percentage, you can simply type in 75%. Again, Excel stores this number as 0.75. Back to our table. We'll add a column for percentage increase, and this is something you might need to do quite often. So basically the percentage increase is going to be how much the sales have gone up divided by where they were to start with. That's the difference between these two figures and the starting point of last year. This is what our formula looks like. Equals this year minus last year. That'll give us how much it's gone up, divided by the starting point of last year. E3 minus D3, all divided by D3. Now there's something I should really mention here, and this is really important in Excel. Notice that I put the subtraction in brackets. Well, the reason I did this is that if I left out the brackets, the answer would have been wrong. That's because Excel always does division and multiplication before it does addition and subtraction. That it doesn't go from left to right as you might expect. So if we didn't include the brackets, we'd actually get the wrong answer. So I'll prove. Well, first of all, I'll just press enter so you can see that my formula is working. 0.085. I'll change that to percentage, and we've got an 8.6% increase, and I'll fill that down. So we've gone up quite a bit in the north region, down in the south region, pretty much the same in the west, giving us an overall percentage increase year on year of 1.86%. So let me just return to the brackets thing. If I double click on that cell and I take away these brackets, I basically get the wrong answer. So basically what it's done here is it's done the division first. D3 divided by D3 is going to be 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So it's basically simply E3, 1200 minus 1, but it's a percentage, so it's multiplied by 100. So you might remember from your school days that this is actually called order of operations. So some people may have learnt the order of operations as BODMAS. That stands for brackets of, which is like powers and square roots, then division and multiplication, and then addition or subtraction. Some people might have learnt it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which is parenthesis, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. Same idea. Always be aware of this in Excel. Quite often, if you make a mistake, you do get crazy answers, so it's obvious, but that's not always the case. The last format I want to look at is the date format. Let's type in a date. March the 4th, 2020. Now when you type in this format, Excel automatically recognises it as a date. What you can do, however, is change this short date to a long date format. So it's now in short date. I'll change it to long date. Now ironically, if you typed in this formula as Wednesday, March the 4th, 2020, then Excel wouldn't have recognised it as a date. You actually need to enter it in a short date format. Now interestingly, Excel actually stores this date as a number. I can prove this by changing from date format to number format. So that number is actually the number of days since January the 1st, 1900. I'll just change it back to a date format using Control Z. So why did I tell you that? Well, because dates are stored as numbers, we can do arithmetic on them. So I can do something like equals that cell plus 7 days. So when I press enter, it gives me the date 7 days after that. So that's dates. Now we haven't mentioned text format. Most of the time our text cells can stay in general format, but there are some times when you might want to use a text format. For example, if you use codes which start with blanks. So if, say, we're going to replace the North region label with a code, let's say that North region is code 05 and it's run by manager 6 and it was set up in 1999. When I hit enter, Excel treats it as a number and the 0 simply disappears. Let's just delete that entry and I'll format the cell as a text format. And then I'll enter our code. So it was 05 6 1999. So now when I press enter, I've still got my 0 and it treats it as text. Now we do get this little green flag, interestingly. So if I click on the cell, we get this exclamation mark and a message which says this number, the number in this cell, is formatted as text or preceded by an apostrophe. And I can convert it to a number, which obviously I don't want to do, so I've done it deliberately. In this case, I'm going to ignore the error. Now that we've looked at cell formatting, let's move on to the fill handle and how it can be used with the different text, number and date formats that we've just discussed. We've already looked at the fill handle to fill down formulas, but now let's look at the fill handle in relation to some other options. So here we've got some text. If I just click and drag text, it just copies it. However, if we look at something like Monday and we fill that down, Excel actually understands what a day of the week is. So it'll actually fill in the days of the week. And there's some extra options here. As soon as I have filled down, I get this little box here called the autofill options box. Now that's got some extra options. So for example, we can choose fill weekdays, and what that will do is get rid of Saturday and Sunday. So we just have Monday to Friday. Months work the same. Excel understands months, so we can fill down months. Same with Jan. We can fill down Jan. Now sometimes it may be the case that you want to actually repeat Jan in every cell. So what you can do is return to the autofill options box and choose to copy cells. So that just puts Jan in every cell. Let me just do a Control Z to show you a shortcut. If you want to copy Jan down, what you can do is hold down the Control key and it does the same thing. With numbers, if we fill down the numbers, we get the numbers, but we can change that to fill series. Or again, we could use the Control key. We don't have to increment in ones. We can choose an increment. For example, if we wanted to take this column down in increments of 50, we just put in the first number and then we select those as a group and then we fill down. Finally, dates. We can fill down dates. Now, just hit another shortcut here. You don't actually have to click and drag down. You can double click, and most of the time that'll fill down to where you want it to fill down to. Not on every occasion, but most of the time. Now, dates have actually got quite a few interesting options. So at the moment we're just incrementing by 1 day at a time. But we can do, well, we can do fill weekdays again. So we don't get the Saturdays and Sundays. As an alternative, what we might do is fill months. So now instead of incrementing by day, it's the 11th of each month. One more thing I should mention. I've been working vertically, but there's no reason why I can't work horizontally. So now we've looked at cell formatting and the fill handle and how it can be used with the different formats. Now let's move on to our last topic, copy and paste. Now Excel has some great features around copy and paste. So the simplest copy and paste is select Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. Now one thing that doesn't come with a paste is column widths. So we can actually correct that. We get this paste options menu here. If I click on that, I can choose keep source column widths, and now I've got an identical copy. These marching ants will go eventually, of course, when you do something else, but you can just use the escape key and that gets rid of them. Now I should point out that there's no link between these things. So if I change that number, then that number's not going to change. That should go without saying, I guess. Okay, let me just Control Z to go back to where we were. And let's try something else. So I'll select the table again. This time I'll select it in a slightly different way. I'll select it by clicking on the top left, holding down the Shift key and clicking on the bottom right. Once I've done my selection, I can do Control-C again. Click on F2. But this time, instead of Control-Ving, I'm actually just going to right-click, and here under Paste Special, we've got all sorts of different paste options. So let's pick out just a couple of important ones. The one at the top left, which is previewing behind there, is a normal Control-V, a normal paste. And then we already looked at this one here, which is keep source column widths. So you can actually do that in one step if you select that one. Now this is rather nice. Paste values. I'll demonstrate this. So if I click on that, we can see that we've just got the numbers. And actually, to make it clear, I'll also, no, I can't do that. Let me just go back to there. Okay, so let's have a closer look at this. Let's make the column widths a bit bigger. Okay. So over here in this table to the left, we've got some formulas. So net profit for the year is the sum of those figures. Whereas over here, that's just a number. It's just a value. So it's pasted only the values, not the formulas. So that's important to know, because if you change these figures, then this is not going to change. This is useful for things like price lists, where you want to just create a formatted list and you don't want any calculations in there. Okay, what we can also do is we'll use Format Painter. So what Format Painter does on the Home tab is basically I want this table to look like this one. So what I can do is select the whole table, click on Format Painter up here, and my cursor changes into a paintbrush, and I can use that paintbrush to paint over this table, and what it does is basically copy the format. These are still values, by the way, there's no formulas, but I've got a formatted report with no formulas. Okay, let me just control back a few steps, back to where we started, and a couple more things. Firstly, if I select this table, I can move it by just grabbing the top and moving it down or across wherever I want to put it. Let go and it's moved. The formulas will have updated, so it'll still be robust. Let me undo it again. And what you can also do is, rather than just move it, we can actually copy it. So same technique, just hover over the outside edge, this time hold down the Control key and then drag, let go, and we've actually got a copy, an identical copy just below. Something else we can do is we can selective copy. So for example, if I just want, say, this column and the last column, so basically last year's figures, what I can do is highlight the first column, then if I hold my Control key, I can select the third column. So basically I'm selecting two areas which are not next door to each other. In technical terms, that's called non-contiguous data. It's not next door. Control C, Control V, and it's just copied last year's data, i.e. it's missed out in the middle. There's one more thing I'd like to show you, and that's about inserting several rows or columns at once. So quite often people miss this. So for example, you probably know that if I want to put a column before column D, I just right click on the header, insert, and insert a column. But what if you want to do 2 or 3 or more columns at once? Well, the answer is you simply select 2 columns if you want to insert 2 columns, right click, insert, and it's inserted 2 columns before your selection. So that's it. I hope that gives you some confidence to go ahead and create some of your own specky spreadsheets.